Morning, everybody. It's nice to be back and see some older and familiar faces. I oftentimes joke, people ask me, why did you sell your hog business? And I talked about, in many cases, I got tired of PRRS. Was one of constantly fighting disease. I want to get back into an industry that is a little more stable, doesn't have quite that pressure. I sold in 2014, of course, and in 2015, the very real event of a foreign animal disease happened in that particular industry called Avian Influenza. And I want to share with you a few of the comments that came out of that outbreak. And the first point I would like to make is that this risk of African swine fever is real. All right? It's real. And as producers, we need to be very cognizant of that because it's happened in the avian industry and it could happen here. And you guys need to be prepared. So we've talked about we all know that in this room the presence of the swine industry in the state of Iowa, but don't forget that the poultry industry is also a significant industry. We're number one in layers, and this particular slide shows the registered sites for poultry in the state of Iowa, and it covers the state much like if you were looking at the slide showing the registered for sites for pork producers as well. And so we are a significant industry in terms of layers. We've got about 60 million layers, just short of 60 million layers in the state. I can't remember the numbers of turkey and broilers, but it's a significant industry and has a significant economic impact in the state. And so in 2015, that very real event was an avian influenza outbreak that occurred. And just to give you a sense of how many groups and producers were involved, 24.7 million out of that short 60 were eventually euthanized as part of that process, which was about 41% of the Iowa layer industry. And I'm happy to say that none of the businesses that I am associated with personally were involved in that, but I got many friends and colleagues that were, and I'd like to think that it was our strict biosecurity that saved us, but in many cases it might have been just dumb luck. In regards to turkeys, 1.4 million or 1.1 million turkeys were euthanized through the process, which is about 10% of the Iowa stock. And when you think about the taxpayer dollars that were involved in this outbreak, $950 million was the number I could find. Jeff, you may have a more accurate number. But you think about the economic impact, 1.1 to 3.8 billion dollars of economic activity was disrupted in this outbreak. So it doesn't have just, it's devastating obviously to the farms that are involved in the outbreak, but there's a whole ripple effect that goes through the industry when this outbreak occurred. So if an outbreak does occur, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that if it was on your farm, at this point it's really not about you anymore, because you're going to have a whole host of entities that are going to be involved in that process. Number one, you're going to have the federal government involved at the USDA APHIS level, because their role and challenge is to stamp out disease in this particular case. You've got the Iowa Department of Agriculture and the State Veterinary Office who's involved in the permitting process, and et cetera. You'll have the Department of Natural Resources involved, and you're going to have the Department of Public Health. Department of Transportation was involved, as well as county and municipal landfills. The point I'm trying to make is that it takes a great deal of coordination and communication to make that work. And one of the lessons that was learned in the avian influenza outbreak was just how important it is to communicate prior to an outbreak and to plan for that outbreak. And number two, when the outbreak occurs, you've got to have clear communication and a clear chain of command. You'll understand that the federal incident commanders are the people that are involved in those and that have direct control on the ground. And one of the problems that occurred through that process was that they'd work 21 days straight, and then they'd give those guys a break and they'd bring a new guy in, and making sure that they had continuity in that transition was sometimes an issue and a struggle. But they got better as they went along. And one final comment I would make is in this area is that we all like to complain about the government, right? I mean, they're an easy whooping boy, especially with what's going on today. But I got to tell you, when you need them, they were there. And if you stop and think about that outbreak, those people who work in those areas of responsibility did a masterful and marvelous job. And we should be glad that we have the infrastructure that we have in place today. Because when you look at what's going on in China with African swine fever, they don't have a chance to control that disease in their country. And without the structure and the governmental institutions that we have in place here, we do have a chance if it happens. It'll be bad, it'll be devastating, but we have a chance because we have those institutions in place, and we should support those people in their institutions. Another lesson that was learned, and frankly there was a GAO report that came out with 39 lessons learned out of that avian swine break. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to talk about the ones that matter from my perspective. So early diagnosis and prompt euthanasia is really important. These farms are big. The one on the left that you're looking at is a large laying site. You can have multiple millions of animals on these sites of various ages. And the example on the right-hand side then is a turkey farm. They're usually typically smaller. The age groups are more in line with each other usually. But when avian influenza hits, the chance of transmission from that site to another, the risk of that transmission going up is with the longer you let that virus incubate and circulate on a farm, the greater the risk of transmission to another farm through aerosol, through people, through trucks and transportation. And so it became very clear early on that we needed to figure out a way to euthanize rapidly. And so when you think about a multi-age barn on the left, how are you going to do it? Normal euthanasia methods for producers are CO2 carts. And in this particular case, after going through all of the potential options, in order to get euthanasia done promptly, they had to go to ventilation shutdown. Now, I'm telling you that that's not the preferred method for anybody. But I'm telling you, as producers, have you thought about what you would have to do if you had to euthanize every animal on your farm and try to get it done in the next 24 to 48 hours? How would you do it on your farm? You need to think about that. Once you've got them euthanized, you have to figure out how you're going to dispose of those animals. My understanding, Jeff, if I'm correct, is that in an ASF outbreak, you're not going to haul them to a rendering plant. You're going to have to come up with a plan. This was an area there was a lot of things learned with avian influenza as well. Up in northwest Iowa, they started out saying, well, let's try using incineration. So they brought in these huge commercial incinerators. And Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was going to take like 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to use an incinerator to make that happen. Of course, you've got all kinds of issues with, what's going to happen with the stuff coming out the stack, how are you going to comply with those kinds of rules. Your other options are burial, composting. Some people thought we could haul to a landfill. You can imagine the discussions that occurred in terms of concerns for, first of all, now we're going to put trucks on the road, haul them down a road. Are we going to take these trucks by other poultry farms and potentially infect those farms? What's going to be the impact to human health if we potentially bring these carcasses into a landfill? Is there going to be human health concerns? I can tell you that Jeff has told us in our industry, in the poultry industry, that we need to figure out a plan to dispose of the animals on our farms. And on each of the farms that I'm involved in, I got land set aside for the day that comes that I've got to do something. And we've got plans in place so that we know that we can compost all the animals on our farm. We're making those plans. We've identified the sources of compost material. We know who the people that could grind, and we have those plans in place. And we practice them. I mean, we talk. after this outbreak of avian influenza, it's been a game changer for us in terms of planning for that kind of an eventuality. The other thing you need to think about is, if you're not the guy that's involved, but you're in the area, what am I going to do with my products? Right? What am I going to do with my pigs? What am I going to do with my eggs? So this is one of the shots on one of the farms I'm involved with. You know, we got 7 million birds over at Grinnell right now that kick out eggs every day. We haul out 12 truckloads of liquid egg product every single day. And you see these storage tanks over here on the right. We've got storage for egg product for maybe 3 or 4 days. So if you were in a control zone and you didn't have a permitting process to move product, where am I going to go with those eggs? Because the chickens don't stop laying. And the pigs don't stop growing. So the point is that you can hold them for a little while, but you need to make sure that you're involved with that secure pork supply program. You need to be making sure that you're attending the meetings that Andrew just talked about so that you are aware and up to date, knowing what you're going to do with your pigs and your products. The last big lesson for us was you got to practice good biosecurity. And it's got to be more than just a keep out sign. All right? It's got to be more than that. So we've invested millions of dollars in terms of shower in, shower out, and processes and procedures. We don't even let people go outside of our barns anymore. We got people that work, all they do, if I got to bang on a bin, I got to call on the radio and say, go over to bin number 53 and bang on that bin for me, because our people don't go out. Once you go in that barn, you don't go out. You have to have, biosecurity is expensive. It's inconvenient. And as time goes by after an outbreak, you go, I hate that process. I'm telling you that you have to live it and you have to breathe it every single day. So in summary, I would simply say that the risk of a foreign animal disease has never been greater than it is today. The risk of African swine fever is real. If you look at what's going on in Australia, I think they've found 15 cases of meat products that were contaminated with African swine fever. That risk is real, and we need to be prepared. You need to participate and have plans in place so that if it were to happen on your farm, how would you react and respond? So get involved with the secure pork supply plan, and when Andrew has a meeting, show up and figure out what you need to do on your farm. Thanks.